nobody ever asks the question that actually matters. Not whether they are out there, not whether they are coming, but what happens to you, to your body, to your brain, to the cells running inside you right now, when something genuinely, fundamentally, never before encountered enters the picture. Because the answer is not what most people expect. It is not wonder. It is not curiosity. According to immunologists, neurologists, psychiatrists, and psychologists who have studied this specific question using real medical data, the human body and the human mind are profoundly, perhaps fatally, unprepared for contact with something genuinely alien. And the scariest part is that the damage would not come from hostility. It would not require a weapon. It might not even require physical proximity. The act of contact itself, at every level, from the microscopic to the psychological, carries risks that most people have never thought about, and that no government on Earth has seriously prepared its population for. Stay with me, because by the end of this, the question of whether we want to make contact is going to feel very different than it did when you clicked play. Start at the smallest scale possible. Inside your body, right now, there are approximately 37 trillion human cells, and alongside them, roughly 100 trillion microorganisms, bacteria, fungi, viruses that have been living in and on human bodies for millions of years, co-evolving with us, shaping our immune system, regulating our digestion, influencing our brain chemistry, protecting us from pathogens by occupying the ecological niches those pathogens would otherwise fill. This ecosystem is called the microbiome, and it is not separate from you. It is part of how you function, and every component of that ecosystem has been calibrated, over millions of years of evolution, to interact with the chemistry of this planet. Earth chemistry, carbon-based, water solvent, oxygen-metabolizing chemistry that every living thing on this planet shares in some form. Because every living thing on this planet shares a common ancestor. An alien organism does not share that ancestor. It does not share that chemistry. It has evolved under different pressures, in different conditions, potentially using completely different molecular machinery to store information, build structures, and interact with its environment. And here's what that means for your immune system in a contact scenario. Your immune system does not have a general purpose, detect and destroy capability. It works through pattern recognition. Billions of years of evolution have trained it to recognize the molecular signatures of Earth pathogens, the protein structures on the surface of a bacterium, the specific shapes of viral proteins, the chemical markers that identify something as foreign versus something that belongs. Expose it to something whose molecular architecture has never existed anywhere in Earth's evolutionary history, and the pattern recognition system has nothing to compare it against. It may not recognize the alien organism as a threat at all. It may simply let it pass. The way a security system with a list of known criminals would let through a criminal whose face has never been photographed. Or it might do the opposite. It might recognize that something is there, recognize that it does not match any known pattern, and respond with what immunologists call a cytokine storm, an overwhelming system-wide inflammatory response where the immune system floods the body with signaling molecules in an attempt to destroy something it cannot specifically target. The same mechanism that makes certain viral infections lethal is not the virus itself destroying tissue. It is the immune system destroying tissue in its desperation to eliminate an invader it cannot precisely identify. An alien microorganism that the immune system cannot specifically target but registers as a generalized threat could trigger exactly this response. The body would be killing itself trying to fight something it does not understand. This is not theoretical extrapolation with no grounding in reality. We already have a controlled experiment that tells us what happens to human immune systems when they encounter a genuinely novel biological environment, space. NASA research has documented in peer-reviewed studies that astronauts in space experience measurable immune dysfunction. Natural killer cells, the immune system's frontline rapid response units, show reduced activity in microgravity, latent viruses that have been suppressed in the body for years, including the varicella-zoster virus that causes chickenpox. Reactivate in astronauts at measurable rates because the immune suppression of a new environment gives them an opening. And space is not an alien biological environment. There are no alien organisms there. It is simply a different physical environment with different gravity and different radiation levels. The human immune system is already compromised by that alone. Place it in the presence of genuinely alien biology, and you are adding a variable the immune system has no evolutionary preparation for whatsoever, and the pathogen risk runs in both directions. An alien civilization making contact, or a probe from one, carrying even trace biological material from its point of origin, would be introducing organisms into Earth's biosphere that Earth's biosphere has equally zero defenses against. Not just the human immune system. Every organism on this planet, every plant, every animal, every insect, every soil microorganism, the entire web of life that has co-evolved on this specific planet for 4 billion years, has no template for recognizing or resisting something that evolved somewhere else entirely. The alien microorganism would not even need to be a pathogen in any intentional sense. It would not need to be designed to cause harm. It would simply need to be something that Earth chemistry does not know how to stop. Scientists have a name for what could happen in this scenario. They call it biological contamination without a defense. And they note, quietly but consistently, that the 1969 Apollo quarantine protocols, which required returning astronauts to be isolated for 3 weeks on the off chance they had brought something back from the moon, were abandoned before we had ever confirmed the moon was sterile. We stopped being careful before we had proof we needed to be. Now move from the body to the brain, because even setting aside every biological and immunological risk, what happens to a human mind during an encounter with something genuinely non-human is something that real researchers have studied using real data, and the findings are not reassuring. Dr. John Mack was a Harvard Medical School professor and a Pulitzer Prize-winning author who spent years studying over 3,000 individuals who reported contact experiences with non-human intelligence. He was not a credulous researcher looking to validate extraordinary claims. He was a trained clinical psychiatrist applying rigorous diagnostic standards. And what he consistently found was that the psychological profile of people reporting these encounters matched, point for point, the clinical profile of post-traumatic stress disorder in war veterans. Hypervigilance, intrusive memories, panic attacks triggered by specific sensory stimuli, sleep disruption, a persistent sense of being watched, dissociation from normal reality, the full clinical picture of severe trauma, appearing in people who had no prior history of psychiatric illness, following encounters that they described as overwhelming their ability to process what was happening to them. The mechanism behind this is something psychologists now understand reasonably well. The human brain processes reality through what researchers call mental schemas, frameworks built from everything you have ever experienced that tell you what is possible, what is real, what things mean. When something enters your experience that does not fit any schema you have, your brain does not simply add a new category and move on. It enters a state of acute cognitive dissonance, a conflict between what you are experiencing and what your existing understanding of reality says is possible. An acute cognitive dissonance is not uncomfortable in the way an argument is uncomfortable. It is destabilizing in the way a major trauma is destabilizing. It can trigger the same neurological stress cascade as a physical threat. The brain treats an encounter that shatters its model of reality as an emergency, flooding the body with cortisol and adrenaline, activating the threat response system, and encoding the memory with the same high-intensity imprint that causes flashbacks in combat veterans. Psychologist Tim Lomas, in a 2024 study published in the Journal of Humanistic Psychology, gave a specific name to what happens when previously stable assumptions about reality are suddenly forced to crack. He called it ontological fracturing. Not a total collapse of your worldview in a single moment, but something in some ways more insidious. A permanent structural damage to your ability to be certain about fundamental things. What is real? What is possible? What your place in the universe actually is. People who experience ontological fracturing do not simply update their beliefs and continue normally. They enter a period of extended psychological reorganization that can last years. The assumptions that made daily life feel stable, that made the future feel navigable, are no longer intact. And they cannot be restored to their original state because the experience that fractured them cannot be unfelt. Now scale this from an individual to an entire civilization. A confirmed, public, undeniable first contact event would not be experienced by one person or a small group. It would hit every human being on Earth simultaneously, through every media channel, in every language. With no preparation and no graduated introduction. 8 billion people, all holding different worldviews, different religious frameworks, different cultural assumptions about humanity's place in the universe, all having that worldview fractured at the same moment. Research published in Nature Astronomy in 2025 found that 58% of astrobiology experts believe intelligent extraterrestrial life likely exists. But among the general public, most people have no psychological framework for integrating a confirmed contact event with their existing beliefs about religion, meaning, identity, or the specialness of human existence. The same research showed that the more conservative a person's religious beliefs, the more harmful they perceived the possibility of alien contact to be. Not intellectually threatening, harmful. The language of threat and injury, applied to a piece of information. What that means physiologically is measurable. Chronic psychological stress has direct, documented physical consequences. Elevated cortisol over extended periods suppresses immune function, disrupts sleep architecture, increases cardiovascular risk, and accelerates cellular aging. A global population under the sustained psychological stress of a confirmed contact event, without adequate preparation or support frameworks, would be a global population with a measurably compromised immune system, arriving at precisely the moment when a compromised immune system is the worst possible situation to be in. If any biological material from the contact is present in the environment, the overlap between these two risks, the biological and the psychological, is not coincidental. They would reinforce each other. The psychological stress response suppresses the immune system precisely when the immune system faces its most unfamiliar challenge. The immune system's struggle to process something genuinely alien would contribute to physical symptoms that would compound the psychological distress, and the infrastructure required to manage any of this, the hospitals, the research facilities, the public health systems, the mental health services, All of it would be operating inside a civilization whose fundamental assumptions about reality had just been permanently altered. There is one more layer that almost no one discusses when this topic comes up: the human gut microbiome. Those 100 trillion organisms that regulate immune function, produce neurotransmitters, including a significant portion of the body's serotonin, and maintain the barrier between the body's interior and the outside world, is exquisitely sensitive to psychological stress. Research published in Frontiers in Physiology in 2025 confirmed the bidirectional connection between psychological state and microbiome health. Sustained psychological stress, exactly the kind that a confirmed contact event would produce across an extended period, directly disrupts microbiome composition in ways that further compromise immune function and mood regulation. The body and the mind are not separate systems that can be damaged independently. They are one system, and a contact event would be hitting every part of that system at once. So here's the full picture that nobody presents when this conversation comes up. First contact, depending on how it happens and what it brings, could simultaneously trigger an immune crisis the likes of which no historical pandemic prepared us for, a global neurological trauma event with no clinical playbook to follow, and a psychological destabilization of civilizational foundations that took millennia to build, not because of hostility, not because of weapons, simply because contact between something from here and something from somewhere genuinely else, at any scale, interacts with the human body and the human mind in ways that 4 billion years of Earth evolution left us completely unprepared for. The question has never really been whether we want to meet them. The question we have never seriously asked is whether, when that moment comes, we are going to survive the meeting.